You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Liam.
I'm Shane.
And I'm Dave. And we're talking about parties and how they're composed.
But is it appropriate for both, someone like me, like an established warlord, and also, part of the great gentry by right of murder or destruction, and Liam, who's
Look, mate, you
Liam?
come to clean the dunny, don't you?
Is it appropriate for both of us to be in this party together? Won't people talk if they see us together? Would it not cause a bit of a ruckus?
Let them talk, Shane. Let them talk.
More of a ruckus than your average party causes.
But it is sort of it is sort of one of those things that sort of twigs at the. It's less that it's a problem, but it's sort of it's one of those noticeable issues where, someone having a cell phone in a Master and Commander movie, a bit of an inaccuracy where there's a bit of automatic breaking of social class, or even just like subgroupings, I guess, in the average party, which is a very positive message and all that, but it's also one of those things that can sometimes just feel very weird and out of place in a setup. And again, much like our previous discussions on having Wookiees and slime monsters and whatever a half elf, half dragon, half vampire would look like in your party. Things like social class or social grouping. These are things that people have often. It'd be hard to bring across the table. It's one of those subtle, social things that people tend to notice when a well-dressed aristocrat is hanging around with a weird elf dressed in silks and magic next to them, and then they've got three sewer workers with broadswords trailing around after them.
Well, I suppose the one assumption might be, oh, that noble has a bit of an odd entourage, or has some hired help. So that's one take.
It's a take, and it would work in some situations. There are situations where you would expect a noble to have some well-armed, maybe not very nice people around them, but in other cases, it might be considered unseemly for them to even be associating with the lower classes. And obviously it's going to depend on what type of medieval politics or space racism that you have in your current milieu. But it is something that's come up throughout history, and it is something we tend to gloss over.
I think it's not something we dwell on a huge amount because it's not something we experience much day to day. I don't think it's as gone away as people like to think it is. I mean, most people don't have many friends outside of their own, rough air quotes social class. If you're a working professional, most of your friends and stuff tend to be working professionals as well. It's just kind of how do you make friends? Well, you make friends in school, you make friends in college, you make friends in the workplace, and that tends to be who you gather with. And typically, they're roughly in around the same strata as you are. So it's not as gone away as people like to think. Now, there's not that same stigma associated with it, and certainly if you're involved in different activities like sports and stuff, you get people from all backgrounds playing it, and absolutely, that's how you make friends from absolutely anywhere and everywhere of any kind of social class. Ultimately, for an adventuring party, why is that noble hanging around with those three commoners? Well, because they have to because that's the adventure. So the players need to have some reason why they're there.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Well,
will that have social repercussions? Yeah, I mean that absolutely that story. Yeah, like will you go from using the Woodford terms? You know, you're gold 3 and you're hanging out with a bunch of guys who are brass status. Will that kind of effectively mean that you're, as you go around the town, maybe you're only regarded as gold 1 or silver? Yeah, maybe.
Mm. Yeah.
it might be worth it for that noble though to have have hired, they have competent help on their side as opposed to the correct sort of help.
Yeah, absolutely. The history, much like it's littered with, examples of classism, is very much filled with examples of, nobles reaching out to people of other social strata in order to enable, unseemly activities to go their way. There are all kinds of examples of that. It can just crop up in unusual ways. Like, I think the example of Woof is particularly telling because,
Well, it systemizes it. You know,
yeah,
it's not
because it
just
has
vague.
it gives incentives for randomized party members, and at tier 1, yeah, those could be it wouldn't be too many social strata apart, but like you can still end up with a situation where you have a wealthy merchant, from out of town, as one. Well, wealthy is the wrong word. A merchant from out of town showing up, and hanging out with the literal rat catchers and sewer cleaners of one city, and a nature priest of another, and
I guess for those who don't know the system, it's basically you have brass, silver, and gold, and typically what you'd have is that your commoners and rat catchers, sewer cleaners, farmers, everybody, they'd all be brass of various degrees, from 1 being the lowest of the low, like a rat catcher or a sewer worker, up to well, actually, I don't recall if it actually has a hard cap, but like 5, with 5 you'd be verging on going up to the next one, which would be silver. And silver would generally be your burghers, your tradesmen, all those kind of things. But again, you get up to high enough levels of those guys, then you're moving into the next tier, which would be gold. And gold is where you have all your nobility. And I don't think there's a cap on how high gold goes, because you've got nobles who are gold 8, and I think the emperor is gold 13 or something.
yeah, yeah. And I do think the system does have some like role playing penalties for different
Usually, yeah.
classes interacting with each other.
Yeah,
But
if the noble goes down into the rough part of town and starts asking questions, they're going to be at a negative. And if the brass party member, if the rat catcher goes up to the noble party and is trying to interact with them, then they'll be at a penalty.
yeah, so we don't want to just be all. It's not all just upside for the nobles, despite what they want. Yeah, yeah. It's there's a social tension there, and therefore you sort of incentivize. This is something we brought up in our diplomacy episode. This is like you sort of incentivize, rather than having one social nicety, party member who has just stacked nobility on top of, diplomacy talents to social any encounter away. You're now incentivizing, well, we picked the right party member for the right social context, so maybe it's the down as luck fighter and rat catcher who is being sent into the seedy bars to get information, and that's good for party variety, but it also means that awareness of social class becomes sort of part of the milieu of your things. And yeah, that's something that Wolfrup is good at, but I'm not sure your average, D&D party where, we bought a module, let's start running it thing, um, necessarily prepares a group for that kind of thinking the same way a Wolfrup does. And to a certain extent, I suspect it doesn't want to. It wants to sort of live in that space of, the fact that we are choosing to be this wild and diverse band coming together to defeat Tiamat or whatever, is an apropos good, and we're not really worried about, will this work in the universe? We're just sort of showing or being in that space, and that's aspirational, sure, but not all, do you want your game to be aspirational, or do you want your game to engage with, well, here's the social realities of a setting? And I don't think either way of approach of doing it is bad or anything. It's just, or which one are you expecting to have happen?
Well, I think in general, looking at any of the fifth ed stuff that's been run, that I've run or that's been run for me, any of the background stuff that comes up is generally just positive. It might be that, oh, you're a folk hero, so these people put you up for free, or they'll buy around for you or something. It's never like, oh, you're a folk hero, so therefore the local noble looks down on you because you're just some filthy commoner. I think that's in general, fifth ed has tried to steer away from anything which might be considered prejudice. And absolutely, classism is 100% prejudice.
Yeah.
And in general, fifth ed has steered well clear of that.
And as I say, it's a noble goal to try to be approachable to all groups, and it's mainly the question of, like, do you, maybe a certain group wants to engage with a certain level of prejudice, and that's
Well, if you're exploring a particular setting or particular historical milieu, like
not even
you're
historical, it's part of our current world.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I suppose it was more obvious at one point,
Yeah.
or most points. Well, in a game like, say, King Arthur Pendragon, status is incredibly important. Like, you're playing knights, and how they interact with other characters, like, of different classes, is part of the game.
Yeah, and there's an endless back and forth about whether you should be allowing things like, well, there's a Lady Knights issue that people come up, but there's other things like Jewish. I don't know if nobility is the right word, but like those of Jewish descent, or that still have something approaching knight status, because medieval history was complicated and convoluted, and you'd end up with a person who had all the trappings of or equipment and resources equivalent to a European Christian knight, but may have been of a different social background or a different religion, or even the classic tale of Palamedes coming all the way from North Africa to be part of King Arthur's court.
Yeah, he's like, they're recognizing him as an equivalent to their own status, like, as in, yes, this is clearly a knight, even though, like, that might not be exactly what he is. But
Yeah. And like, history is full of history and mythology and stories. They're always full of these examples of, well, it is
We'll
appropriate
make
to,
this person acceptable.
yeah, like, there's always a question of, like, we will consider this person acceptable, or we will put in some effort to make them a thing, or we will maybe accentuate their difference in one way, but in order to make the sort of practical differences disappear. And again, like, do you want to engage with that, or you just sort of want to celebrate the diversity? And that's a sort of a group question. And again, it's not that you're fighting, there's still great grand agenda to cause everyone to get together on Bayar or anything. It's more like that if you're in a sort of, particularly if you're in a dark setting, something like Wolfrup, or a World War One spy thriller where millions of people from Indian subcontinent are dying on the fields of Belgium because we needed
Meat for the meat grinder.
yeah, meat for the meat grinder. And all of a sudden, you're getting sort of class tensions as the British nobility, who are because they're mates with everyone in government, they're the ones who are filling the all the spy or special operations command positions, but they're bringing in people from the colonies or foreigners from America to consult, or that kind of stuff. maybe presumably if you're getting really into that sort of milieu, like the fact that there is this really big obvious tension in social upbringing and appropriateness to do X or appropriateness to do Y, or who's allowed to get their hands dirty. Suddenly that becomes a big part of your setup, and if you just sort of brush it off in the name of freewheeling action, then well, suddenly, like, are you playing the same game you thought you were playing? It's the kind of thing where it's entirely understandable that people don't engage with it in most cases, but depending on the effect that you're trying to create, maybe you kind of have to engage with it a little.
Yeah, again, it's context dependent, and there's also the question of, I suppose, what has gotten this party together. Is it just complete random chance? You're at the side of the road and you're stuck into a hellish situation and you have to cooperate or you're doomed, regardless of the niceties, and work out those details later when things are less hectic? Or do you all have a patron who's compelling you to work together? Or you all have some incentive, or you all have you've all come together because you have intersecting interests. Like one particular lord has wronged you. Yeah, well, some lord has wronged you. The noble, like it's the noble's brother who screwed him out of the inheritance. The mighty warrior has a grudge against him because he burned her village, etc., etc.
Yeah, these are all things like once you create a reason for these people to come together, there you can create all kinds of stories. It's the issue where we'll all meet at a bar, and all these 5 people show up with their different backgrounds and backstories, and they just sort of we're sitting around a table in real life, so let's sit around a table in the game and just decide to go kill goblins together. That's where you could sometimes. It's like at the time it's just convenience, but then you're 27 session in, and you're showing.
Why are you still there?
Yeah, why are you still there? And your noble characters trying to show their new goblin mushroom druid boyfriend to their parents, and it's just like like how much do we want to engage with the weird social and implications here? Like maybe we don't, that's fine, but maybe it's going to annoy us until we do. Actually, now that I say meeting at a bar is an issue, that's, I think people are thinking very differently. It's a very modern take on a bar, where it is like it's part of a city or town, and it's people are walking in, both strangers and local folk, and it can be very little weird if a fancy person comes in. But when I suspect like original fantasy authors and fantasy game authors were thinking about it, they were probably thinking of an inn, and this inn is probably across a long, travel road, and it may be the only inn for a day's travel in either direction, and everyone has to stay at this bar. Like social class on the road can't be allowed to be anything. Yeah, sure. If the emperor comes along, he probably going to get the best room in the house, but the emperor, unless it's a very particular type of emperor, he can't just like bring a bed with him. You're going to have to sleep in a bed in this inn, and yeah, the commoners might be in the common room, with some rags for bed sheets, but everyone's staying in that one inn. But yeah, so it's a different social context than we're used to, I think. And again, it's just, the attention to detail might explain. Well, yeah, obviously they're all in this same inn with like 3 rooms that everyone has to share, because that's what's here. You're the guys who are on this road for whatever reason. Everyone's here at the same time, and that's just sort of how it is. And the tension maybe very often. Well, you'll get together at one of these bars, become an adventuring party, have a couple of adventures, and then you'll go to the big city, and then all of a sudden, people will start asking, "Wait, why are all these people hanging out together?" And I mean, you can have a very entertaining time telling people about the grand bonds of friendship that were forged, fighting the Troglodyte King.
I think once the wheels are moving, I don't think it's really a problem, because, yeah, why you're adventuring? Well, because we're an adventuring party, I think you just need that initial setup for getting the group together, and it is you're in an inn and the inn gets attacked. You're traveling from A to B and the caravan gets attacked. I guess what the Buffett starter said is that you're in the middle of a square and a riot starts and the watch come in and arrest you all and press gang you into the watch.
Yeah.
Boom! You're now an adventuring party because you're on a squad together, and the noble is now a sergeant, and everybody else is not. Everybody else is just a corporal.
And actually, that's a very good point. And again, we keep using examples for Wolfrup because Wolfrup, with its weird mix of the chaos of fantasy role playing and a weird fixation on using real medieval weirdness as its major inspiration. Wolfrup does this a lot better than a lot of other games because it puts it front and center and makes it, as I say, a game mechanic in a lot of cases. So the structure of having class and cross class relations, really sings there.
I think the various iteration of Ars Magica has had it as well, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. I mean, Ars Magica, like the classes are not definitely not equal, but that's not an impediment to the game. You have the trope play. Yeah, you play one player. Generally, one person plays the mage, and other people play assistants, and that's how it goes.
Yeah, and it is very much a situation of social niceties because you'll have your weird wizard who's been living in the forest because that's where the magic is strongest, and smells of burned mushrooms and dead frogs, and they'll have to have one of their companions who's the actual minor noble with some social skills to introduce them to everyone and just tell them, please ignore the smell. But I was just go back to the Ubersreich example. That works very well because the Ubersreich starter set, like even if you already have a copy of Wolfbrook 4th Ed and don't see why you need an extra copy of starter rules, the Ubersreich starter box is an amazing purchase anyway because the Ubersreich setup is amazing. And one of the big things is that it's pointing out, Ubersreich is a city in flux. Ubersreich is a city where no one is quite sure what matters anymore. Like, how much does nobility matter? Who are the nobilities loyal to? Maybe a commoner is loyal to the emperor is more important than a noble family who's loyal to the old regime. And in that context, having something like, the city guard are just putting people in jail and pest ganging them regardless of social class becomes a lot more palatable. And that's sort of, we're in a weird situation. Our campaign setting is in a weird situation. And all of a sudden, once the chips are down, all of this big social, stratification suddenly doesn't matter. There's a theme right there.
Yeah, you could explore those dynamics and have a great time doing it.
And of course, it's always good to have a villain who wants to bring back those social strata after the first thing,
or to rearrange them in a manner that they find more conducive.
I think you need to have a party that is down with it as well, though. Because we can all have a great time, and if I'm the noble, we go to our campsite. I'm like, Scarr, get the tea ready. And when you're finished, shine my boots. And ha, that's a bit of a joke, but I'm not bossing you around. I'm we're bossing your character around, and that's something we go along with. I think it's incumbent on both players for the person who's playing the higher status not to push the boat. And to doing little things like that is ha 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 great. It's a bit of a laugh, but not to go too far with it. And then I guess the other player, if they're on board with it, then yeah, cool. We'll just go roll with that kind of thing.
Yeah, again, it's all about setting boundaries and how far do you want to draw attention to one thing. And I think the sort of idea that maybe nobility or high social status or whatever doesn't always have upside. It also comes with complications about, well, now that I'm upper class and it would be unseemly for me to be anywhere near this part of town, so I guess I have to either put on a ratty disguise or I have to get the rest of the party to do all the work over here.
I mean, probably the most extreme example of kind of line crossing in Warfrip is, I don't recall what they call it, but there are young nobles who will go around with hired bodyguards, starting fights in low bars, so then the bodyguards kick the tar out of whatever brass person stands up to them. Basically, just go around spilling drinks and being obnoxious to people, and if anybody kicks up, then their bodyguards kick the tar out of them.
Well, that's a wonderful opportunity for PCs to deliver some comeuppance, assuming they can.
Assaulting someone who has gold status. Good luck, you're in jail.
Yeah, assaulting someone's gold status and getting caught.
Warfrip is exception. So, well, getting caught is one thing, but then the watch will be after you, not them. But Warfrip is incredibly messed up. If a noble commits a crime, the courts will not judge them. The next noble up higher up in the chain will judge them.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm well aware that Warfrip setting is it definitely leans into those class differences with meaningful impacts. But yeah.
Thankfully, we've gotten rid of all that stuff. We don't have a case that if you rob a pensioner, you'll go to jail for years. If you rob 1 million pensioners, you might get a light fine.
Yeah,
not that I condone robbing pensioners. I'm more coming down hard on the on our lack of punishment of white collar criminals.
But I just did think of something else that another element is to explore the changing status within a party. For example, the last Wolfram game I was in, I started as he presented himself as a sailor, but he was actually a former breaker. Basically, sifting through shipwrecks. So during the course of that campaign, he, along with the rest of the party, accumulated wealth and reputation by mostly doing good deeds and very much covering up any of their awful deeds. And he ended up, where we left off, he was engaged to a noble lady and had the respect of the town. So actually becoming people in the eyes of the nobles. Or close enough.
Yeah. I mean, social mobility is we consider it generally a good in our modern societies, and so it is something to think about injecting. Like, it's a very different if you be careful that if you're sort of making together your the sort of social system, that you're creating an actual social hierarchy that is plausible in your setting, and don't accidentally create a caste system where suddenly people are essentially defined by their roles at birth, and the gods themselves will smite those who flaunt it. I mean, that's not even getting into stuff where only certain types of people can wear certain types of clothes or the like. If you're going to be engaging in this thing, this level of thing, you do need to think about, real life was rarely as rigid as the grand propaganda of ancient nobility, or the great histories of Herodotus might have let out.
Yeah, no, the reality is generally a bit more colourful and complicated and messy than neat historical narratives.
But there is, we've been very much talking about this in terms of hierarchy, but there is there are like social, castes is the wrong word, but even stuff like religion. And okay, maybe that's getting into an entire different episode, but there is such a thing as, where, there are things that maybe is appropriate for a rich man and appropriate for a poor man to do, but there's also like what's appropriate for the clergy to do, or different religions.
I mean, that can vary massively, even depending on different sects of different things. If you compare gospel preachers over, predominantly in the US, but certainly other parts of the world as well, and compare them to, different monk orders in Coptic Roman Catholic churches, and some of the vows that they've taken, that basically they issue most material goods. If you can just, like, those are absolute extreme oppositions of each other within fairly similar religions.
Yeah, and just like a lot of people seem to, you see an awful lot of fancy games who just sort of assume a Catholic Church type thing deal, but without any of the actual power of the Catholic Church, and this is where you get these weird things where people talk like they're part of a hierarchy, but they act like they're just independent preachers who set up shop in a church somewhere, built it themselves. It could be a little weird. But maybe just to finish out, I mean, like, this is all big talking about social structures and historical precedents and all that. But at the end of the day, we do have to remember that whatever social structure you put into your game, it has to enable the game you want to play, and that's why often it doesn't come up, is because the game you want to play is relatively freewheeling and far more concerned about physical mobility than it is about social mobility. If you're trying to get from place to place, you're probably going to inadvertently be creating a social situation where it is appropriate for your characters to be going from place to place.
I mean, there are parties who have, when you're playing through The Enemy Within, there are parties who have to be dragged kicking and screaming off of their boat on the Reich, because they've just enjoyed going up and down the Reich, trading money, trading and accumulating money in order to increase their standing. Even though the game is okay, you now need to progress and move on to the next book.
Yeah.
It depends what your game is about. Like, your game could well be that your characters want to increase their social standing and they want to move up to the next tier. Unless they're playing a flagellant, in which case they're brass zero and will always be brass zero. Nobody likes flagellants.
Yeah.
They're just a bit odd.
But some people like to have them around as a pet or a piece of furniture.
Shows how devout you are. Look, you're supporting this flagellant.
Yeah, exactly. It's the style of the time.
I mean, like hermit, literally, we have had in histories where you would build a hermitage on the grounds of your big fancy estate to show, look, I have a pious hermit living on my lands.
Yeah, there's one of those over at St. Anne's Park where the Guinness family had just a little hermit cave built into the side of a bridge.
Yeah. There's some gold status folks having a brass zero guy hanging around in the estate just to show, look how,
Yeah. But I guess where I'm sort of going with this is that this is about sort of, there's a balance between resolving the niggling feeling in the back of your head that maybe it looks weird that this the son of the king is hanging around with this foul-smelling troglodyte who likes picking worms out of cobblestones. But at the same time, what game are you playing? Are you playing, social standing simulator 101, or are you playing, Star Trek or Star Trek Wars, where they're, going boldly and shooting laser blasters at everyone who disagrees with them? You know, it's adding, a sort of social consciousness to your game should only be as useful or as dramatic as it is useful or dramatic to be in your setting. I guess I'm saying this a lot lately, but it's just don't get surprised by it. Don't be surprised. Don't leave yourself so unequipped to engage with the subject matter that it isn't going to hit you in the face when you, as I say, it is, you discover in your rulebook there's 17 types of illegal for a cleric to marry a troll for whatever reason. But if you're running a game about people marrying people, then find a way around that.
I think you need to absolutely include it in the game, but be aware of your party, because I think classism is something that people will be. I mean, okay, everybody's aware of racism, everybody's aware of homophobia, and rightly so. But classism is often a blind spot for a lot of people, and it may well be that somebody in your group has been subjected to it. So be aware of it and be prepared to drop it if need be, because there's some fun in it. But on the same token, you can absolutely ignore it in your game if you feel you need to.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, does it serve a purpose in your game? And if not, well, there's other ways to run a game.
I can also have a good time, tell good stories, and if that. I can absolutely be part of telling a good story, but if it's ruining everybody's fun, then yeah, bye bye.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing. As usual, it sounds like talk to your players is going to be one of the big takeaways from this. And in the meantime, I think we've proven through much waffle and a lot of questing that I think we all can get together into this adventuring party. But at the same time, I think this party is over.
You would say that, you filthy oik.
Oh, you peasant!
Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter, or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license, but you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.